Bob Silliman.
Yes.
Bob Silliman, as I said earlier, is the Ohio State coordinator of the Agenda 21 Coalition, and I'm sorry that's all I've got as an introduction, so I'll let you finish that up. All the way from Southwest of Toledo, Ohio, Bob Silliman. Thanks for making it tonight.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Agenda 21 is something that is spreading across the United States. It is something that is working behind the scenes. I want you to keep this in mind all the time. It's also called something else. And I'll get into that in just a second. But the thing of it is, this thing is working in behind the scenes. Very few people know about it. I've called our U.S. senators, U.S. representatives, their staffers. No, I don't know what that is. Well, you got a couple of minutes, so we talk about it. Sometimes they're busy. So anyway, same way with the state people here. A lot of them don't know about this, or they know a little bit. But really, it takes a lot of research to find out really exactly what it is. Anyhow, it's also called, besides Agenda 21, it's called Sustainable Development. There's lots of other cute little names they put on it. Where'd it come from? Well, it came from the United Nations in 1992 for Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit. And anyhow, it uses the environment to control wealth redistribution. That is, our wealth goes into a green rat hole. I'm sorry to have to put it like that, but that's the truth. Straight out. How does it work? Civic leaders organize committee meetings run by facilitators. The facilitators work behind the scenes. They are highly trained specialists, and I'll go into where they come from and how they get there in a little bit. Okay, they outline a vision for the town or the county, and it's enforced by consensus, not by a vote. No need to make a vote when you got consensus, right? The new language that we have includes free trade, social justice, global truth, partnerships, preservation, stakeholders, land use, environmental protection, development, consensus, diversity, visioning, open space, heritage, comprehensive planning. Oh, that's a beauty. Critical thinking. Oh, of course, everybody needs to learn about that, right? Community service. And there's a few other choice words that they'll also use. And we'll get into some of those in a little bit. Sustainable development has come to mean denied resources locked away from human hands. It will curtail your freedom to travel as you please in due time, own a gas-powered car, live in suburban or rural areas, determine the number of children you may have. Oh yes. Determine the rates of harvest of farms and fisheries. Eliminate your private property rights through eminent domain. Increase the price on goods and services through artificial shortages and new consumer taxes. Does that sound familiar to you? Yeah. Okay. It's now the official policy of the United States, put in force by literally every department of the government. It is the policy of every state government and every city, town, and county in the nation. And the last count I heard was there's 1,275 towns and cities and locales, some of the rural locales too, that are under this plan. The report of 1976, the United Nations Human Habitat I Conference, which said that land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. Social injustice. It is social injustice for some to have property if others do not. It is social injustice to keep our borders closed And this is right out of that document. It is social injustice for some to be bosses and others to be mere workers. Sustainable development, and this is another word for it, like I said, is a process by which America is being reorganized around a central principle of state collectivism using the environment as bait. The UN's Biodiversity Assessment Report, items for our everyday lives that are not sustainable are the following: ski runs, grazing of livestock, plowing of soil, building fences, all industry, single-family homes, paved and tarred roads, logging activities, dams and reservoirs, power line construction, and economic systems that fail to set the proper value on the environment. One of the most destructive tools they use and they force on us is something they call the precautionary principle. This means that any activity that might threaten human health or the environment should be stopped, even if there's no clear cause and effect relationship has been established, and even if the potential threat is largely theoretical. The precautionary principle. In their own communities, most decisions are now being made behind the scenes in non-elected sustainability councils armed with truckloads of federal regulations, guidelines, and of course, grant money. There's the real bait, the grant money. Keep that in mind. Yeah, our tax dollars, well put. Every social decision would first be questioned as to how it might affect the environment. The sustainablest system is based on the principle that individuals must give up selfish wants for the needs of the common good or the community. Does this sound like communism? This is the same policy behind the push to eliminate our nation's borders. Under the sustainable system, private property is an evil that is used simply to create wealth for a few. So too is business ownership. Instead, every person will be a direct capital owner. Isn't that wonderful? But then how about the strings that go with that? Something to think about maybe.
You're really
Particularly, large corporations are now finding great advantage in dealing directly with the government, actively lobbying for legislation that will inundate smaller companies with regulation that they cannot possibly comply with or even keep up with. These are called public-private partnerships. Remember that word, public-private partnerships. And you're seeing a lot of that across the country. Just think about the big companies and some of the things they're promoting. Sustainable development is redefining free trade to mean freely crossing or eliminating national borders. They're also working to eliminate state borders, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The real effect is to redistribute manufacturing wealth and jobs out of our borders and to lock away our natural resources. We have new green industries created with federal grants, bringing newfound wealth to these partners, these public-private partners, okay? Because the environment always comes first, there must be great restrictions over private property ownership and control. Humans, after all, only defile nature, according to these folks. We must all sacrifice for the sake of the environment. Individual human wants, needs, and desires are to be conformed to the views and dictates of social planners. The United Nations Commission on Global Governance, the 1995 report, says the following: action must be taken now to control human activities everywhere. And this is a global endeavor, by the way. The environmental movement provides sustainable camouflage as they work to transform the American systems of government, justice, and economics. It is a masterful mixture of socialism with the top-down control of the tools of the economy, and fascism where property is owned in name only with no control. And what's really cute about it is you get to maintain the property and pay all the taxes, but they have the control. When's this going to happen? Well, it's happening a little at a time. Again, it's behind the scenes. Very few people know about it. Even a lot of the politicians don't know exactly what's going on with this. So I don't think we want to jump on them too hard. I think a lot of them have good things in mind, and not just for themselves like some people think, but there are a lot of good people out there that are trying to do good things. So we don't want to be too tough on them right away, but we want to help them. The idea is they need to learn about this, and it's up to us to help them. Okay, we have an organization that is behind this entire movement. It's called the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. I used to have that memorized, but boy, some nights you just can't get it out. The acronym is ICLEI. So ICLEI is a very nice organization, and it's also called Local Government for State Sustainability. ICLEI, by the way, helped to formulate the Agenda 21 policy at the Earth Summit in 1992 that I talked about just a minute ago. They're behind it. It's an international organization. It's a private organization. It is well funded. And so anyhow...
So who's behind it?
I'm sorry?
Who's behind ICLEI?
Who's behind ICLEI? There are a lot of front groups, basically, that support it. And these front groups are supported by, I know of one for sure is the Tides Foundation, if any of you have ever heard of that one. Okay. And there's somebody that funds the Tides Foundation, and I think his first name is George, and most of you know him. George Soros. Okay? So anyway, how this works is they'll come into a town, they'll have a facilitator, highly trained person by ICLEI and or some of their subsequent groups down the line, and they train them very specifically to come in and work behind the scenes. The worst thing that they fear is being discovered. Discovery is their worst enemy, because then people begin to react to it as they learn about it, as the word goes out around the communities, around the cities, and the rural areas. So here's how it works. Somebody, a facilitator, one of these highly trained specialists, will come to a city council, or they'll come to a county trustee, or county commissioners or trustees in the township, and they'll say, we can get you a lot of grants. Well, I don't know any town or any of the cities or anybody that does need some more money. Let's hope that's not a bad one. Anyway, so what happens is they say, well, yeah, tell us more. Well, oh, by the way, we can make EPA go away. The federal and the state regulations, we'll take care of all of that for you. You just follow our ideas and our suggestions, and we'll take care of all of that. So they say, sure, you're hired. So with our tax money, those people are being paid, and little by little, they begin usurping power from the elected officials, being the county commissioners or the town councils or whatever the governmental organization is. So little by little, over a period of months and years, they gain more and more power. And then it goes on from there, and they begin to implement some of these things. This isn't done in 2 weeks or 2 months. This thing can take a year, 2 years, 5 years, but it is on the way. And once it gets a foothold, the problem becomes that these people have all kinds of things ready to go. They have various tools that they use. They have software programs. They have all kinds of things that they can pull off the internet, or they have workbooks, and they have workshops, and they have counseling sessions, and they'll take the local officials and they'll say, this is what we can do. Look at all the good things you can do. And if you read any of those documents, that language is the most beautiful stuff I've ever seen in my life. My gosh, it's wonderful. But what's hidden behind the curtain, if you will, is bad stuff. And this is what I've been talking about. And if you start reading the documents, I have some documents here that proves that this stuff is actually going on. You can come up and read it if you want. It's rather lengthy, but I have, for instance, right here, the Sustainable Development Challenge Grant Program. And this came right out of the Federal Register, dated August 24th, 1998. So this has been going on a long time. This hasn't just happened yesterday. So they got a pretty good head start on us. But that doesn't mean that we can't jump in there, because there's more of us than there are of them. Something to think about. Okay. ICLEI and others are dedicated to controlling your locally elected public officials to quietly implement all-encompassing tyranny over every community in this nation. That's where they're headed. Have no doubt about it. Like a disease, ICLEI is entrenched in most American cities, dictating policy to your local elected officials, controlling policy and making sure they do not listen to your protests. And like I say, these facilitators and the council that they form later on behind the scenes, these people are highly trained. So there are things that we can do. And here's the way. They are told, the people are being told, and the elected officials, that is, are being told what to support and who to silence. Who to silence. But I wouldn't try to do this by yourself. You need a lot of people. You need to make sure you got votes in those government groups, whatever it be. If you've got people on the council that know and understand what's going on ahead of time, you may have to talk to them individually. But you've got to make sure you've got votes before you go in there and start demanding things. They're going to throw you out of there. Think about it. So this is a story on how to take action, and there are lots of other ways that you can work too. And a lot of you have worked in corporations and around the government agencies and so on, and you're probably pretty familiar with how some of this stuff works. Okay, there's a four-part process that leads to sustainable development. In the rural areas, it's called the Wildlands Project. In the cities, it's called smart growth. In business, it's called public-private partnerships. And in government, it's called Stakeholder Councils and non-elected boards and regional governments. Let's just stop there for a minute about this regional government. We have, in the state of Ohio, over in the far southwest corner, around the Cincinnati area, what's called OKI. And that stands for Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. They're wanting to form a regional government that encompasses counties from each of the three states in our corner of the state down there. And if they succeed in doing it, what about the Ohio Revised Code? If you don't have a state line, what about our state legislatures? The people in the legislature, what need do we have of them to make laws if they can't be enforced? And it's also going on in the northwest corner of Ohio, up where I live. It's going on in the northeast corner, up around the Cleveland area. There's one of the people on our Agenda 21 coalition team that lives up there. And there's also some people that are state coordinators, Tea Party patriots for this whole state of Ohio that live up there that I've been talking to, and they're knee deep in this stuff. Cleveland's got a bad situation up there. and Akron, and Alliance, and Athens, and Cincinnati, and yes, even here in Columbus. And there's other cities and towns too that I've run across. Findlay's got it. You may not know where Findlay is right off, but it's up our way. It's to the north of us. So anyway, the idea about the Wildlands Project is the rewilding of 50% of all the land back to the way it was before Christopher Columbus set foot on this nation. That's what they want to do, believe it or not, and there's lots of documentation that proves it. It's a diabolical plan to herd humans off the rural lands and into human settlements. Now, the short term for that is pack and stack. What they eventually want to do is get everybody into high-rise apartment buildings, just like they have in Red Communist China. I know a lot of you have heard about some of these things. It's here, folks. That's what they want to do. It might not be a year or 2 years. It could be 5 or 10 years before that happens. But that definitely is where they're headed. The documents prove it.
There's an awful lot of similar. The Communist Manifesto, their big thing is property rights. They would love to abolish all personal property that anybody has. That's their goal, because that is the road to oppression in their minds. That's what Agenda 21 is attempting to accomplish.
What they do about this land thing, they begin with a Biosphere Reserve. A national park, for instance, would do the ticket just fine. You establish a buffer zone around the reserve. Inside the buffer zone, only human activity is permitted on a limited basis. Slowly, you squeeze until you squash that human activity. Then you expand that biosphere out to the limits of the buffer zone. And then you reestablish a new buffer zone. And you keep going from there. Once accomplished, then you can create all kinds of new regulations, new things that cannot be done in these areas, and so on and so forth. And that's how they squeeze down until they get what they want, where they can continue to expand. For instance, they may push back livestock's access to riverbanks on ranches. 300 feet should be plenty. The rancher can't water his stock. He goes out of business. That locks away natural resources by creating natural parks. It shuts down mines. And they go out of business too. Invent a spotted owl shortage and pretend it can't live in a forest where timber is cut. Then you shut off the forest. Then when no trees are cut, there's nothing to feed the mills and there's no jobs and they go out of business. Locking away land cuts tax base. Eventually the town dies. There's nothing to keep the people on the land, so they herd to the cities. That's the plan. And this comes in many names and many programs. Heritage areas, land management, wolf and bear reintroduction, rails to trails, conservation easements, open space. Oh, by the way, conservation easements, those easements are made that are non-revocable and they're forever. Once they lock that land away, nobody's going to use it, ever. And this is happening. I know of different places around the state where they're doing exactly that. So it's happening some places already. This is not far away, folks. It's at our back door. Understand, this is the real thing. It's here. Okay. There are some other names of the Wildlands Project. Chesapeake Bay Watershed, Appalachian Restoration Project, Piedmont Wildlands Project. The second path that they use for this sustainable development is called smart growth. They put a line around the city and tell you that no growth can take place outside the line. And they refuse to build more roads as a ploy to get you out of your car and into public transportation, restricting mobility, of course. That's where they're headed. They don't want any cars in this nation. You know, we've got global warming. There's a lot of people that believe this now because we've been told this for 20, 30 years or more. And okay, we talked about putting a line around these cities. There's no restriction on, there's a restriction on space inside the controlled city limits, and that causes a shortage of houses. Well, what happens next? Well, the obvious thing, of course, is the prices go up. That means that populations will have to be controlled because now there's a shortage of land within the cities. Cities are now passing green regulations, forcing homeowners to meet strict guidelines for making their homes environmentally compliant. There's a program called LEED, L-E-E-D, and that's a green program, and that's a green program, and it has to do with buildings. And it's like a building code, an international building code. And there is something called ICC, the International International Construction Code. I'm sorry. And one of the things that they do, for instance, is they'll come out and they'll say, oh, this roof you have, it doesn't comply with those environmentally things that we are now requiring you to have on your roof. You say, well, gee, I just put that roof on 2 years ago. Doesn't matter. You're going to change it, you're going to do it now. And they will use our elected officials that they're behind and they're pushing them to do these things. They'll have them force it to be done or else. That's how it works, guys. It's not going to happen next week. It may be 3 years, 5 years, who knows? But it's coming. Okay, another thing they do is they may demand the replacement of your appliances. They don't comply with the environmental regulations now. They're not saving energy or 1,000 other excuses. Now we got smart meters being put on the electrical services to homes. And they're even doing that to your natural gas meters. And pretty soon it'll be your water meters. And I won't go into all the particulars about that because that's a long story and there's a lot of details to it. But believe me, it's not going to help you. They say, well, it'll save money. A guy came to my door today just as I was getting ready to leave to come here. He said, I'm from the power company and I can help you save money. I said, look, come see me next Monday. I'm busy the rest of this week. He said, I'll be back. I said, good, do so. We'll talk. Okay, the third pass that they take in this sustainable development is inside the human habitat areas. Government is controlled by an elite ruling class called Stakeholder Councils. Stakeholder Councils. The function of legitimate government within the system will simply be to enforce the dictates of these councils. And that's when they usurp power from them inch by inch over a period of time. Months, years, just depends. It doesn't matter who you elect, as long as they get indoctrinated. They have this wonderful stuff to indoctrinate all the new local officials, the state officials, and so on and so forth. And they're working hard on it. And they're not going to stop, and they mean business. What they can do, they can dictate you get the proper exercise. For instance, as determined by the government, of course, in San Francisco, for instance, they're building a brand new federal building, the greenest one ever built. The elevators will only stop at every 3rd floor. So riders are forced to use the stairs for their own health, of course.
Oh, no.
Yes, it's true. This whole thing sounds like a Soviet state to me. How about you? Okay, the fourth path that they take is this public-private partnerships that we alluded to a little bit ago. They use the government to ban its own product. That's General Electric is forcing the mercury-laden green light bulbs on you, costing 5 times the price of the incandescent bulbs. The public-private partnerships, they were building the Trans-Corridor Texas corridor using eminent domain to take more than 580,000 acres of private land. Okay? These public-private partnerships are taking over highways and local water treatment plants in communities across the nation. This is a major part of Sustainable Development Blueprint. This is where they're headed. This is their plan. Now, about the Texas corridor, that got shot down. Then I heard just not too long ago, just a few months ago, that no, we've got it back up and working again. We're going to have a Texas corridor. Their aim is to build highways across this nation so that when people come into the borders, they won't have to use some of the back roads, you know. They get a big highway. They go the whole length of our nation, and they're gonna have them going up north and south and east and west as well. What do you think about immigration? Okay, the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, is a root of free trade process that fuels the public-private partnerships between international corporations and the government. Home Depot, for instance, uses its commercials to oppose cutting down trees. Of course, they're a lumber company. And British Petroleum advocates reducing the use of oil. That's a public-private partnership. And what kind of fascism does this sound like? If any of you are old enough and remember some of the fascist regimes that there are around the world and the history of them and what's happened to them, you can pretty well understand what this is. Now, you want to know more about these things? Here's where you go to find out. It's called the American Policy Center. I'll let you write that down if you get a pen. The American Policy Center. The address is 70 Main Street, Suite 23, Warrenton, Virginia. This concludes my talk, except for a couple of little tidbits here. I don't want to keep you too long. Since I'm looking at my watch, you know this is going to be real short. No, it doesn't mean a thing. Okay. Here's something that you might be interested in. This is a 14-minute thing that you can do on your computer. And it was developed by a former public school teacher. It's very well done. And if you want to get more information, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We appreciate it.